Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo, and welcome to another HOBOTECH News product review. EcoFlow is well known for being the top dog when it comes to innovating all-in-one portable power stations, and has expanded over the past few years to now include plug-and-play whole home backup power solutions. Their latest product, the Delta Pro 3, blurs the line between a portable power station and a home backup generator with the ability to expand from 4 up to 12 kilowatts of power, yet can still roll around on its own 2 wheels without needing an external dolly or a cart. This makes it the first ever truly portable split-phase 240-volt all-in-one power station. But is it any good? Let's find out.
HOBOTECH.
The Delta Pro 3, abbreviated from now on to DP3, is a massive upgrade to the original Delta Pro released in 2021. Your first question might be, what the heck happened to the Delta Pro 2? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but EcoFlow said it was a marketing decision to skip directly to version 3, so don't be confused because there actually was no Delta Pro 2, at least in the United States. This sleek new sexy model sports a larger 4,096 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 4,000 cycles to 80% capacity. It's expandable with up to 3 DP3 power stations in parallel for 12 kilowatts of inverter power. And that's enough to run just about anything in most homes. Battery storage can be expanded up to 36 kilowatt hours with 6 of the 4 kilowatt hour DP3 extra batteries when connected through the smart home panel too. That's 2 days of full power for most homes without even adding solar charging into the mix. Now, I did review the smart home panel 2 in a recent EcoFlow video, and it's an amazing product by itself. So what about size and weight? This is where you pay for the larger built-in battery and split-phase inverter when compared to the original. The DP3 clocks in at a hefty 51.5 kilograms or 114 pounds. Yeah. This isn't something most folks can lift up by themselves. Fortunately, it does have a built-in retractable pull handle and a pair of wheels in the back that make it pretty easy for most folks to roll around on smooth surfaces. Now, in comparison, EcoFlow's flagship model, the Delta Pro Ultra, coming in as the heavyweight eco champion at 190 pounds, that's just with one battery, pretty much requires an external dolly to move around. So while the Ultra is technically portable because it's not bolted to a wall, this Delta Pro 3 form factor is actually something you can fit in most vehicles, use in your RV, or take on a camping trip. Now, 4 kilowatt hours is a heck of a lot of juice for camping or RVing, and it's equivalent to 320 amp hours of lithium batteries. Now, as for those DP3 extra batteries, they are far easier to manage than the original Delta Pro batteries. They weigh in at a respectable 73 pounds, and that's for 4 kilowatt hours, and are stackable on top of the main unit, unlike the original Delta Pro batteries. I'm so glad EcoFlow decided to go with a stackable design this time because it makes a huge difference in space management when you can stack the batteries. As for the dimensions of the DP3, they're approximately 27 long by 16 high by 13 wide, and that makes it a few inches larger than the outgoing model. And the extra battery is also 27 inches long, slightly slimmer 12 inches wide, and 8 inches tall. Now that's a major size reduction when compared to the original batteries. Note that the Delta Pro 3 and extra batteries, unlike the flagship Delta Pro Ultra, are not heated, so they can't be charged if the internal cell temperature goes below freezing. You will get a warning up on the screen if this happens. Speaking of which, the display is a new one for EcoFlow. It's much wider and fancier than their other products and resembles the color LCD screen from the Delta Pro Ultra. It of course offers all the important stats such as input-output watts, time to charge-discharge, battery percentage display with animations, among other information such as warning codes. So where the DP3 shines and is different from every other brand on the market is that it actually has both a 120 volt and 240 volt split phase inverter, not just 240 volts, 240 volt split. So why is this important? Well, here in the United States, we're special. We run our large appliances off what's called two-phase 240 volt service, where other countries use single-phase 230 volt service. Essentially, a 240 volt split phase inverter is two separate 120 volt inverters that are synchronized to be in opposite phase of each other at 60 Hertz, when combined make 240 volts. This allows a large appliance like a stove to use 120 volts for the low loads like lights and computerized stuff, while using 240 volts to run the high amperage heating elements. This is all done through a single outlet using a single cord on the appliance. So up until now, a power station that could output split phase 240 volts usually meant combining two separate 120 volt power stations through a special box. The Delta Pro Ultra was the first large power station to offer split phase 240 volts in a single unit. However, the DP3, now its smaller, more portable sibling, can be rolled into any room in your home to power any major appliance, from your oven, your clothes dryer, to an electric water heater. This also means you can level 2 charge your EV or a plug-in hybrid on the go. Now, the catch is that the DP3 can only output either 120 or 240 volts, not both simultaneously. That's the 120 volt inverter. You watch the light goes off when I go to 240. So it's one or the other, but not both simultaneously. However, that's not exactly true, because I'm going to show you here in a bit how you can convert the 240 volt side into a pair of 120 volt lines to run all your regular stuff. Now, the key difference is that only the 120 volt inverter side on the DP3 has the built-in 10 millisecond UPS switching feature, where the 240 volt side does not. This, when it's turned on, it's called an online UPS. It just stays on all the time regardless of what power is being put into it. Now, this isn't really important because major appliances don't need a UPS or uninterruptible power supply. Things like your computer or other electronics are appliances you want to stay online if the power goes out in your home. All of those run 120 volts. Now, as for ways to charge, you do have several. First is from AC power with the included cord, and this is literally the only cord you get with the product. It allows you to charge from 120 volts. You can also buy a separate cord that'll allow you to charge from 240 volts. 120 volts, you're limited to 1800 watts, which is typical from a standard household wall outlet. And at 240 volts, that doubles to 3600 watts. That means at 120 volts, you can charge the DP3 in about 2.5 hours, and at 240 volts, you cut that in half, about 75 minutes. When connected through the smart home panel too, the DP3 will charge at 240 volts up to 4000 watts, or as defined within the app, because of course this has app support with EcoFlow. Second method of charging is direct DC at up to 3200 watts via EcoFlow's shiny new Dual Fuel Smart Generator 4000. It does support auto start and stop and all the features that the old dual fuel generator did. It will keep the batteries charged within a specific range that you set within the app. And at sea level running full bore, charging takes about an hour and a half to charge the DP3. There's a low PV side and a high PV side. PV means photovoltaic or solar. So the low PV side supports 1000 watts of panels from 11 to 60 volts, while the high PV side supports 1600 watts of solar from 30 to 150 volts. This does in fact mean you can charge from a 12 or 24 volt source, as well as external 48 volt battery banks, and use any solar panels you like up to that 150 volt limit. For example, EcoFlow's own 400 watt panel. For a limited time, up until July 23rd, 2024, you can score a free 400 watt EcoFlow portable solar panel with your Delta Pro 3 purchase. And that alone will charge your Delta Pro 3 in about 12 hours. Not very fast. Now, those panels run about 48 volts each. Since this has a 150 volt controller, you put 3 of those in series because you add the volts, and that'll allow you to charge at 1200 watts at 144 volts, which will let you top this up from 0 to full in about 4 hours. That's much better. That's one solar day. Then you can actually use a completely different set of solar panels up to 1000 watts on that low PV side from 11 to 60 volts. The DP3, as previously mentioned, can charge from a 12 volt vehicle, typically around 100 watts from the car lighter socket. However, you'll see here in a moment, there's a way to actually unlock a much faster 12 volt charging speed if you're hooking, say, direct to the battery. You can also charge direct from a battery or a running vehicle using EcoFlow's new alternator generator at 800 watts I do have a separate review on that product if you wish to check it out. Finally, you can, with an EcoFlow adapter, charge at a level 2 EV charging station up to 4,000 watts for topping this thing up in about an hour flat. So you won't have too many people honking their horns behind you waiting for you to charge at your power station. Only takes an hour. As for 12-volt output types, EcoFlow made a big change to the DP3 as to where they no longer offer a 12-volt lighter socket output. Instead, in the side, there's a single 5521 barrel plug output good for 5 amps and a 30 amp Anderson power pole output good for 360 watts of charging at the typical regulated 12.7 volts. As for USB output types, the DP3 offers a pair of 100 watt USB-C power delivery outputs and a pair of 18 watt USB-A quick charge outputs. And of course, the DP3 is supported by EcoFlow's amazing app, and this product is also UL 9540 and 9540A certified. Now, as for the warranty, the standard warranty from EcoFlow on this product is 5 years. But if you purchase using my link in the description, you'll score an extra 2 years for a total of 7 years of warranty, making it the longest warranted retail power station on the market today. And of course, I took the Delta Pro 3 here into my secret laboratory where I performed all kinds of crazy experiments on it, including, yes, of course, let's say it together now, a double-fisted battery capacity test. So this double-fisted battery capacity test is going to be a little different than normal. I decided to entirely skip the DC testing side. For one, it would have taken a full extra day of time to do so, and I was on a pretty tight schedule to get this out. Also, I don't think most folks are going to be buying this to run DC appliances, making that result useless to most. Instead, I decided to test the 120 volt and 240 volt inverters separately to see which one was more efficient. As for the results of the 120 volt AC battery capacity test, that scored 3,810 watt hours out of 4096 for a very solid 93%. The 240 volt AC battery capacity test scored a little bit better at 3,880 watt hours out of 4096 for an even more impressive 95%. It seems we gained 2% just from the slightly higher efficiency of the 240 volt inverter. I, of course, also did the phantom load or parasitic drain test on this product to find out how much power does it use just turned on. So for that, I did do a DC consumption test. I left the 30 amp DC circuit on, and it used 151 watt hours over 12 hours, or extrapolated to 302 watt hours over 24 hours. That's a very good result. That means you can power a long-running appliance like a 12-volt fridge with not much loss over 24 hours. Now, I did do separate 120 and 240 volt consumption tests as well. The results of the 120 volt side, it used 195 watt hours over 4 hours, or about 1170 over 24 hours. So if you left the inverter on, it would totally kill the battery in about 3.5 days. I did the same test on the 240 volt side. It used 193 watt hours over 4 hours, or about 1158 watt hours over 24 hours. Virtually the same result as the 120 volt inverter when factoring in the margin of error for this test, so we'll call those results equal. Now, everyone always asks me, how long can my whatever run on these products? So compensating for usable capacity, which we just found out, you can pause this chart I'm going to put up here on screen. It'll tell you approximately how long Hobbit appliances will run on this product. Pure sine wave check under load. 120 volts, 60 hertz, good sine wave. Same goes for the 240 volt inverter, 240 volts, 60 hertz, perfect sine wave. Inverter capacity test, this is where we push the 120 volt and 240 volt inverters as hard as we can to see how fast they shut down. But let's start with the 120 volt inverter. We're gonna go ahead and push it as hard as we can. 4,000, 4,200, 4,400, 4,500, 4,700, 4,800 is when it shuts down. Same test now, 240 volts. We are using a 240 volt twist lock and the 240 volt inverter for this test. 4,000, 4,300, 4,600, 47, 48, 49, 5,000, 5,100. Okay, 5,100 is the maximum. So it looks like the Delta Pro 3 can handle a little bit more in the 240 volt range. I have this 240 volt 10-gallon compressor. Let's see if it'll run. No problem starting up the compressor. This next test is the 5-minute sustained cooling or heat soak test. We'll run this thing at its 4,000 watt limit. We're gonna do this with the 240 volt side, run it for 5 minutes, see if it'll actually do anything crazy, like start smoking or drinking or TPing the neighbors or forgetting to take out the trash or parking in a no parking zone. Or if it just starts smoking and smelling funny. We don't want it to do that either. So we're already running at 4,000 watts, which is the limit of the inverter. Let's go ahead and start the timer, come back in 5 minutes and see, are there any problems? And here we are coming up on 5 minutes at 4,000 watts. It's no problems whatsoever. There are no weird smells or sounds or anything like that. The fan on it's a little bit on the louder side than what I expect from an EcoFlow product. Let's see exactly how loud it is. So around 55, 56 decibels. That's a little on the louder side.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud. Next please.
Max charge rate test. This, we pump as much power as we can through the solar inputs to see how much power can this thing take. Now, this actually has two MPPT controllers on the back. One is a low voltage one from 12 to 60 volts, and the other one's 30 volts to 150 volts. So let's test the 11 to 60 volt one first. I currently have it set to 14 volts, which would be the typical lead acid battery or lithium battery. 12 and 24 volt people can rejoice, because as long as you're using the orange XT60i solar cable, it unlocks the amperage on this. So the port can take up to 20 amps. This charger can do 20 amps. So we're actually seeing at just over 12 volts, 250 watts of charging. You can see it right there. And that's running at about 13.6 volts. 20 amps. Now that's somewhat unheard of, because usually EcoFlow, Bloody Jackery, they all limit you to 8 or 9 amps or so when you're doing 12 volt charging. Not the EcoFlow, not where you're using that XT60i. Now say you are charging this from a car cigarette lighter port. What you'd want to do is use the yellow XT60, because the XT60 will limit this to 8 amps. XT60i unlocks it and lets it do 20 amps. I'm using the XT60i because I like to push everything to the limit on this channel. That's what HOBOTECH does. So let's go ahead and move this up in voltage and see what our maximum is over here. So this is the wattage coming in, these are the volts going out and the amps going out. So let's go ahead and bump this up to 24 volts. So at 24 volts, you can charge at almost 500 watts. That is nice. So what if you want to charge from a 48 or 50 volt battery pack? You can see here the limit is around 850 watts at 50 volts. Okay, it looks like we are just around 1,050 watts at the maximum 60 volt. At 66 volts, it errors out. It gives me a red error message, a 281 it looks like. Now let's go ahead and switch to the other MPPT controller on the back, which is 30 to 150 volts, and see what that can do. We're now plugged into the high PV side. Minimum voltage is around 30 volts. It's pulling 14 amps at around 460 watts. Go ahead and turn this up to a 48 or 50 volt battery bank. We're at 50 volts, 14 amps, 750 watts. We're now pulling 900 watts. So let's continue to climb the voltage ladder here. 80 volts of solar, we're now at 1200 watts. At 100 volts of solar, we're around 1500 watts. At 120 volts of solar, we're now dropped to 13 amps, for around 1,650 watts. At the upper limit of 150 volts, we're pulling 8 amps for around 1,260 watts. Let's see how much harder can we push it before it errors out. Oh, we see a steep drop right there in the amps. It's allowing it, but it's just reducing the amps, which is kind of weird. There we go. Finally, at around 166 volts, we finally get an error message. So there you have it. It does 1,650 watts, right around 100 to 140 volts. So the results of the max charge rate, according to the manual here, it says that the low PV limit's 1,000 watts, the high PV limit is 1,600. So we saw about 1,050 on the low and about 1,650 on the high. So seems like you can squeeze a few extra watts out of each one of them. So combined, you can expect around 2,700 watts. Now as for AC charging speed, just like the original Delta Pro, you can actually use this slider to adjust how fast you want the Delta Pro 3 to charge. The maximum from AC wall power is 1800 watts. The minimum is actually 400 watts. So the minimum on the original Delta Pro is down to 200 watts, and it did have the same 1800 watt maximum. Now there is another difference. If you notice on the app, there is another AC power in and out slider that goes at the 4000 watts. Now this is used if you have, for example, this plugged into the smart home panel 2 that can charge this thing with 240 volts through your home AC wiring. So you could set here to charge it as fast as 4,000 watts when connected to the smart home panel 2. Now I'm not going to demonstrate hooking this thing up to the smart home panel 2 in this video because this video is going to be super long, but I am going to do a separate video where I hook this with its smart extra batteries up to my smart home panel 2, and we'll see how that performs. So you may be wondering, just how loud is this thing when you charge it from AC or DC? So right now I have it charging at its minimum 400 watt AC rate. There's no noise whatsoever. It's completely silent. There's no fans turned on. So let's go ahead and crank it up to 1800 watts using the app. Now let's let it crank up and see how much louder it is. All right, well, I've had the Delta Pro 3 charging for about 5 minutes or so at its maximum AC charge rate, and it's barely making any noise. If I stick my ear up to it, I can hear what sounds like a fan spinning super slow. I don't think it's going to pick up anything on this. It's probably going to be in the mid 40s. Let's go ahead and see. So yeah, 42 decibels, whisper quiet. Okay, so I've had the Delta Pro 3 charging for approximately 10 minutes at its maximum rate. The fans finally just kicked on. I was just about to say it was silent, but the fans did kick on. Let's see how loud they are from a meter away. All right, they're right around 45 decibels. That's practically whisper quiet. You're not gonna be bothered at all while you're charging this thing with AC power. All right, after several minutes of high PV charging at 1600 watts of fake solar, the fans are finally running and they are a little bit loud. So let's see how loud they are. So at around 56 decibels, that's about the same as the inverter fan noise. So what about simultaneous charging? Can you charge from AC and DC at the same time? Yes, and if you can tell how loud it is in this room, it absolutely can charge very fast with both AC and DC. So right now I have high PV maxed out at 1650, plus I have AC wall charging maxed out at 1800. So there you have it, 3320 watt. Now I don't have any way to max out both PVs at the same time because I need 2 of those special cables. I don't have both of those right now. It does say on the website here for the Delta Pro 3 that both PVs combined is 2600 watts plus AC charging maximum 1800 watts plus the gas generator all combined can charge this at 7000 watts. That is pretty dang fast for charging a 4000 watt hour battery. So yeah, you can charge this thing ridiculously fast if you have like the ultimate setup. Now one thing I also want to make note of is that the Delta Pro 3, just like the original Delta Pro, can be combined together. But in this case, you can actually combine 3 together. So you can have 12,000 watts of output on this with multiple batteries for each one. So you can scale this thing up to a tremendously large, pretty much full home system. You can power most things in your residential home at 240 volts at 12,000 watts with no problem. So I did a little preview YouTube short of this product, and I had a few of you ask, please let us know if you can charge it with both 120 and 240 volts and still get 120 and 240 volts out. So I've already shown you guys that while charging this thing with 120 volts, the 240 volt inverter works all the time. Now this works as an online UPS. That means it doesn't have a switchover time on the 240 volt side. But I do know that the 120 volt UPS on here, according to the manual, says it is a 10 millisecond switchover time. It says standby UPS, 10 millisecond switchover. That's incredibly fast. So I do have this computer, which you can watch a video on this if you're interested. I have a video playing on YouTube. As soon as I flip this switch, it turns off the charging power to the Delta Pro 3, and we'll see. Does the computer stay on? Place your bets. 3, 2, 1. And of course, no problem whatsoever. Video still playing, computer still on. We're no longer charging. Let's go ahead and turn it back on just to prove to you that it is actually plugged in and charging. You can see the PC there is running at about 60 watts power, and there it goes back to charging again, so no problem. Musician's favorite amp interference test. This is where we determine, is the inverter in the Delta Pro 3 clean or dirty? So all I have to do is turn the inverter on, it's going to power the amp, and we'll see, does it make any weird buzzy noises? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Sounds perfectly clean. Now, being an EcoFlow product, I didn't expect any less, especially at this price point, but you still got to check these things. Okay, AM radio interference test. I'm going to put the AM radio right here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the unit on. Let's see if it makes any noise. I'm going to go ahead and just put this right in front of the speaker so you can hear it. Okay, I'll go ahead and turn on the 120 volt inverter, then the 240 volt inverter, and then I'll finally turn on the DC circuit. We'll see what kind of noise we get. All right, so turning on the unit, it's pretty clean. DC is also pretty clean. The 120 volt side is pretty noisy. The 240 volt side is crazy noisy. So if you are concerned about radio interference, you're going to make sure that you keep your radios far away from this when the inverter's running. All right, let's move on to the EMF test. This is electromagnetic interference. Let's go ahead and turn this off to start with. Okay, we're starting at a baseline of almost 0. So let's go ahead and turn this unit on. Jumps up a little bit, but it is actually nice and clean. So there we are with the 120 volt inverter. It is registering about 60, so that's moderate. Let's do 240 volts. Interestingly enough, this isn't putting off as much interference as the 120 volt. So the 120 volt is at 60, and the 240 volt is almost half of that, around 30 to 40. So believe it or not, the 240 volt actually puts off less electromagnetic interference. Let's try the 12 volt circuit. 12 volt circuit doesn't do anything. So actually not too bad at all. I've seen a lot worse when it comes to inverters, and it's kind of surprising that on the AM test, you're getting a lot of noise, but then on the EMF test, it's like half. Now, I know there's some of you that don't care less about those results, and some of you care a lot about those results, and that's why I do them. Now, I know when I did a YouTube short, some of you asked me to do a 120 volt and 240 volt charging test. Now, unfortunately, EcoFlow didn't provide me any way to charge this with split phase 240 volt. The only cable they sent me is the 120 volt cable. Now, I could hack something together to get it to work, but I really don't want to hack anything to test this out. We do know for sure that you can charge this up with 120 volts, and both the 120 and 240 volt inverters work. You cannot run 120 and 240 volt at the same time. Now, that being said, if you do want to do 120 volt at the same time, all you need is one of these. Now, I bought this for testing this product. It takes 240 volts through the twist lock, turns it into two separate 120 volt circuits. So the green dots are one 120 volt leg, the red dots are the other 120 volt leg. If you're interested in this, I will put a link in the description, because what this will allow you to do is use the online UPS, which stays on all the time, and run additional 120 volt circuits. So say you don't need 240 volts at all, you can still run the 240 volt inverter and split it out to 120 volts. This is EcoFlow's new 4,000 watt dual fuel generator. This actually hooks directly to the new Delta Pro 3 using this 5-meter cable and an adapter. Let me show you. Okay, first you need to plug the adapter into one of the battery ports on the Delta Pro 3. Then take one end and plug it in. Then on the dual fuel generator, you open this little port, and then you go ahead and plug in the cable on this side. Then using the EcoFlow app, you can remote electric start this generator to charge your EcoFlow Delta Pro 3. The generator also plugs into the EcoFlow power kits using one of the battery ports, and with an adapter it can also plug into the Delta Pro Ultra. So say you're in the Delta Pro 3 and 4 kilowatt hours is not enough, you can easily expand it another 4 kilowatt hours with one of these Smart Extra batteries for the Delta Pro 3. It does come with a 1 meter long battery cable, which allows you to kind of put the battery wherever you want. They do stack on top. Unlike the original Delta Pro where you couldn't stack the batteries, now they actually finally have it so you can stack the extra batteries on top of the main unit. So hooking it up is, again, super simple. So just plug in the cable, and the only feature the battery has is an on and off switch, and this bar tells you how much the battery is charged. In this case, it's charged about 1/3 of the way. So right there, you see it's changed. It now says port, and it has a little green light, and the battery percentage went from 100% down to 65% because the extra battery is not fully charged. So when you do hook up the Smart Extra battery, it does recalculate depending on how charged it is. So what do I think about the DP3? I think the Delta Pro 3 is a beautiful product both inside and out. It's very well designed, seemingly bug-free. At least I didn't notice any bugs, but I also didn't test the home integration part yet. I'm going to do that in a separate video. It's also very powerful for its size. Now, it's not a lightweight. Having 4,000 watts at your disposal with a top-of-the-line split-phase 240-volt inverter comes at a price. It does push the upper limit of portability, but it's still portable enough to leave the room it was unboxed in and venture onward and forth. Nixing the 12-volt lighter socket output was a questionable design choice, but I don't really think most buyers of this product are really going to care. And if it is a big deal to you, leave a comment in this video for EcoFlow, because they are going to be reading every comment. Now, if you do want to plug in a 12-volt fridge into this, or multiple 12-volt fridges, you can simply buy an Anderson to 12-volt socket adapter online, so it really shouldn't prevent anyone from getting this product. Now, here's my one and only gripe with the Delta Pro 3, is that the 2600 watt solar input on this thing should have been done better. I get the 1000 watt 11 to 60 volt low PV input side because you might want to hook up portable panels or charge from a vehicle. You're probably not going to put more than 1000 watts to this when you're camping or using it in a vehicle. But after using the awesome 4000 watt PV input on the flagship Delta Pro Ultra, which also allows for a crazy 450 volts of solar panels, the wimpy 150 volt 1600 watt high limit on this new Delta Pro 3 is definitely weak sauce. The reason I say this is that if you max out the DP3 with 2 extra batteries, you're going to be charging 12 kilowatt hours of batteries with only 2600 watts of solar. So do the math there. Let's assume you set up some complex solar arrays in such a way to max out both of those solar inputs to 2600 watts. It's still going to take you 5 to 6 hours to top up on a perfect solar day. Now, why they didn't put a similar 4000 watt MPPT on this model, or at least offer a third 1600 watt MPPT, is another questionable design decision. This thing can fast charge at 7000 watts from multiple sources. If you throw generators and solars and AC power, it'll charge at 7000 watts. So it's not a limitation of the battery charge rate. It was actually an arbitrary limit decided by one of EcoFlow's engineers. Anyway, seeing that there's really only one major thing to gripe about with this product, it's otherwise fantastic, and I digress. Product price. Well, in typical EcoFlow fashion, they have not released pricing to the public, including me, as of the recording of this video. Remember, this was done a few days before release. They're still being pretty tight-lipped on what this thing's going to cost when it comes out. One thing I can tell you is that EcoFlow is offering customers a choice between a free 400 watt folding solar panel and $500 off. They're also going to offer $300 off of bundles with the Smart Home Panel 2, that 4000 watt smart generator, or if you want to get a DP3 extra battery for this. These are all, of course, limited time deals only until July 23rd. However, if you use my link, you're going to score an extra 2 years warranty on top of the basic 5 for a total of 7. And if you use my code, you're also going to nab a free EcoFlow monitor to boot. So if you're interested, the link and discount code is going to be in the description of this video below. I'm also going to put a link right here at the bottom of the screen, along with a QR code that you can scan with your mobile if you're watching me on TV. That'll take you on over to the EcoFlow store page where you can check out the fabulous Delta Pro 3. Thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me that thumbs up below. And if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe, and clean my litter box.